Hey lore lovers, my name's Eric with the Lorebrarians YouTube channel, and today we'll be covering a topic that is at the heart of the new Zendikar Rising set, the ancient and mysterious core Skyclaves. With the defeat of the Eldrazi titans Kozilek and Ulamog in the battle for Zendikar, some semblance of normalcy has returned to the plane and its inhabitants. The tumultuous royal remains erratic and destructive, but all around Zendikar the wilds are regrowing, and the people are rebuilding what the Eldrazi destroyed. Adventurers are once more dusting off their traveling boots and seeking out all the wonderful plane has to offer, and it's in this Zendikar that we find ourselves. But something stirs underneath and across the continents. Long forgotten structures buried to time have awakened and exhumed themselves from the earth. They have been raised from marshland, mountain, and sea to rest among the clouds in gravity-defying orbit. These structures are the Skyclaves of the ancient core, and their appearance has heralded a new age of exploration and archaeological study as expeditionary teams and plunderers alike race to uncover the treasures and secrets that hide within. But what exactly are the Skyclaves? How did they come to fall? What's triggered their return? And what sorts of mysteries can be found deep in their storied halls? These questions and more will be answered as we learn of Zendikar's past and the terrible collapse of a grand civilization. Alright, let's dive in. The core, a race native to the plane of Zendikar, are in the current day a nomadic people who revere the earth and the sky. They travel in small bands with nothing more than the barest of essentials, preferring the harsh life of migrants to the mundane but predictable life of city dwellers. They are masters of the rope and the hook, using their tools to effortlessly scale the verticality of Zendikar during their journey across its continents. But the core were not always a nomadic people. In fact, quite the opposite. They once built massive cities and villages, cultivating the land they claimed and living in more sedentary communities. Perhaps their greatest contribution to history was creating the farthest reaching and most advanced civilization that Zendikar has ever seen, the great Mckindy Empire. More than 6,000 years into the past, and centuries before even the Eldrazi titans first appeared, the plain of Zendikar was lush, calm, and flowing rich with mana. Ancient species began forming tenuous communities, and from them came the first civilizations. Humans, merfolk, elves, and perhaps even the reclusive Surikar created structured cultures that would act as the progenitors of today's tribes and nations. Chief among these species were the core, whose knowledge of lithomancy and use of it through stone forgers allowed them to create exquisite works of artifice that catapulted them ahead of all others. Based on the continent of Ondu, the core stoneforgers erected elaborate structures and cities vibrantly filled and teeming with life. Greatest among these cities was the capital of the budding core nation, Makindi. As a naturally wide-aligned race, the ancient core valued structure, unity, and peace. Using these values, they expanded their territories, taking into their protection an ever-growing number of other races, until their reach extended beyond Ondu, onto the other continents of Zendikar. A core empire was on the rise and would become known as the Makindi Empire in homage to their bustling capital city. Predicated on peace and tranquility, the Makindi Empire spread its influence to the farthest reaches of the plane, creating an extensive network of city-states, outposts, and villages, and ruling other races through a generally benevolent and hands-off policy. For many years, Makindi, and by extension all of Zendikar, prospered. But the core soon realized that governing such a large empire was difficult, and began conscripting warriors to ensure the peace. The other races saw this as an authoritarian grab for power, and resentment began to simmer between the empire and their subjects. Soon, the once great and peace-seeking empire degenerated into a vicious, iron-fisted military state that sought desperately to maintain control of its territories. It employed its stone forgers to undergo a project of grand proportions. They were to construct elaborate, powerful, and massive flying stone fortresses known as Skyclaves. The Skyclaves were the pinnacle of both core technology and its oppression of other races, and the Makindi used them as mobile bastions of the Empire's influence. 7 Skyclaves were made, one for each continent of Zendikar, garrisoned with thousands of core warriors, officials, and other delegates, and bristling with stone-forged armaments to quell rebellion across the land. Each Skyclave was the size of a large city, and was powered by a roughly spherical central core, described as a miniature sun and charged with ancient core magic. The Skyclaves set out from Makindi to keep order across Zendikar. What the core did not realize was that this moment signaled the decline of their grand, long-lasting empire. Over the course of nearly a century and a half, the illustrious and powerful Skyclaves came crashing back to the Earth, one by one. 3 Skyclaves were overtaken by rebellious forces or those hostile to the Makindi. The clave above Balaged was tasked with beating the elves of Moldaya and other races into submission, but failed. Obun, an unassuming elf that at one point lived amongst the core of the Skyclave, became leader of the Moldaya clan and urged his Greenweavers and elvish warriors into a fierce battle with the Balaged Skyclave, ultimately overthrowing the core and sending the Skyclave toppling to the earth. Meanwhile, on the continent of Akum, the independent and barbaric Kargan tribes formed a bond with the deadly dragons that roosted in the peaks of the mountains. Their war leaders rode the dragons into battle, bringing fire and fury to the Akum Skyclave until it was a charred husk of what it used to be. The 3rd Skyclave to fall came at the hand of an archangel of Zendikar, Iona, the Shield of Emmeria. Likely witness to the atrocities incurred on other races in the name of peace by the Mckindy Empire, Iona brought swift and terrible justice to the Tazim Skyclave, single-handedly shattering the structure. The remnants of the Tazim Skyclave remained suspended in air, and millennia later would become known as the Sky Ruin of Ameria, and location believed to be the residence of the god known as Kamsa to the core, and Ameria to the merfolk, Iona acting as its warden. 2 of the massive Skyclaves were defeated by more natural means. The violent storms, seismic activity, and general upheaval that's collectively referred to as the Royal began stirring at this time. What's interesting is that the Royal is believed to be closely connected to the presence of the Eldrazi on Zendikar, a natural inflammatory response by the plane to kill or otherwise slow the spread of the Eldrazi infection. But at this point in history, the Eldrazi Titans have yet to make an appearance. Perhaps Zendikar is reacting to the immensely powerful and artificial magic that powers the Skyclaves and is contained within their lithoform cores. But this is just a theory with little hard evidence for support. Regardless, the Royal made its presence known much to the misfortune of the Gul-Draz Skyclave. The land, angered by the Makindi core and hungry for retribution, opened up its earthly maw and swallowed the Skyclave, entombing thousands of core in the bubbling muck of the Gul-Draz swamps. The Skyclave above the continent of Marasa met untimely demise in a similarly swift fashion when an enormous and unnamed sea monster ripped it from the sky and dragged it into the dark depths of the Zendikari Ocean, which we can see in the flavor text of Skyclave Squid. The ancient leviathan named Lorthos may have been responsible for its destruction, or perhaps one of its progenitors. The Skyclave remained submerged for thousands of years, becoming home to rare and exotic aquatic species. With the destruction of many of their Skyclaves and swift decline of their once great empire, the remaining core of the Makindi quickly turned to another for blame. In the political and military power vacuum that accompanied the collapse, the leaders of the Ondu Skyclave turned against their fellow core in the capital city of Makindi, and the nation devolved into civil war. Stoneforgers hurled slabs of rock at each other, warriors equipped with deadly blades joined in a bloody melee, and sorcerers tapped into the power of Makindi and of the Skyclave to fuel destructive spells. When the dust settled over the battlefield, the vibrant capital and crown jewel of the Mckindy Empire lay utterly leveled and entombed in deep gorges that would later be known as the Makindi Trenches. The Skyclave fared no better, plummeting into the small island known as War Isle and breaking into dozens of pieces. There can be no doubt, the grand civilization and plain-spanning empire of Makindi became no more. The final Skyclave to fall was that over the frigid continent of Shijiri. The planeswalkers Sorin, Ugin, and Nahiri lured the Eldrazi Titans to Zendikar to imprison them, and as they manifested into physical form, one lashed out at the helpless Skyclave, shattering it and encasing any survivors in polar ice. With the last vestige of the ancient Makindi Empire destroyed, the ruined Skyclaves would remain hidden and dormant for the next 6,000 years, their secrets and power lost to time and buried under the earth, ice, tar, and water. Flash forward several millennia, and we are once again witness to a Zendikar on the rise. The Eldrazi have been defeated, the land and its people grow to recover, and adventurers once again set course for realms uncharted. Several expeditionary houses existed before the Eldrazi awoke, but one has risen to prominence after the battle for Zendikar, the Seagate Expeditionary House, due in large part to its rediscovery of the Tazim Skyclave. The Skyclave has remained suspended in ruin since its destruction at the hands of Iona, drawing awe and curiosity from the races below. Over the course of thousands of years, the memory of the Skyclave was transformed into the belief that the ruins held an ancient and powerful god. The site slowly became one of holy worship, and its name bore that of its deity, Emmeria, the Sky Ruin. For generations, the Archangel Iona guarded Emmeria, the floating ruins of the Mckindy Empire Skyclave. She barred all from ascending into the deepest reaches of the ruins, partly to maintain the mortals' belief and faith in their god Emmeria, and partly because she knew that the power of the ancient core was dangerous in the right hands and far worse in the wrong. But when the Eldrazi stirred from their slumber, Iona was called to action and left the Skyclave unguarded. This opened the door to a small band of explorers that sought divinity, riches, knowledge, or all three within the ruins. We can gather this information from the flavor text of Akiri, Fearless Voyager, who no doubt led the expedition into the Skyclave. What they found surprised them as they realized the ruins were not the residence of a god, but rather a fortress from a time long past, filled with ancient knowledge and power, a Skyclave of the Makindi Empire. The adventurers trespassing triggered the awakening of the Skyclave's power core, bringing it once more to life, and stirring the other six from their centuries of slumber, as well as their inherent defenses. Now, across all the continents of Zendikar, the Skyclaves are rising, freeing themselves from their earthly prisons and once more joining the Tazim Skyclave in their orbit above the ground. Interestingly, the other Angels of Emmeria seem to be against Iona's view, assisting explorers rather than hindering them, seen in the cards Emmeria Captain and Emmeria's Call. These ancient ruins are full of treasures, artifacts, and ancient knowledge, ripe for plunder from daring parties, and once more instilling the plane with a sense of adventure that is felt as a major theme across the Zendikar Rising set. But exploring these dark fortresses is no simple task. Danger and death lurk just beyond the lantern's flicker. Many of the Skyclaves are home to terrible creatures of prey that have adapted well to life without light, and have grown powerful from feeding off the magic of the ancient core. Feral beasts, nightmare shades, and grotesque insects make piecemeal of stray adventurers and ill-equipped parties. Deadly traps, Skyclave defenses, and perilous dead ends can equally shorten an expedition. And of course, the natural danger that comes with navigating the treacherous peaks and trenches of a royal-filled Zendikar. But riches abound within the Skyclaves, which we can see in the cycle of relics, artifacts from the Mckindy Empire that hold power for those who can overcome their guardians. The promise of glory and treasure, however, are strong enough to motivate the brave, the cunning, and the foolhardy into exploring the old military installations of the greatest empire that has ever existed on Zendikar. And they are sure to uncover secrets of the ancient core that will change the future of the plane forever. For within these Skyclaves are the mysterious artifacts known as lithoform engines, which may have the potential to offer near limitless power to those capable and crazed enough to wield them. Thanks for watching this video on the history of the Skyclaves and the ancient core empire. Leave a thumbs up if you liked the video and subscribe for weekly content. I'll continue to cover stories from Zendikar in the coming weeks surrounding the release of the new set. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on the strange lithoform artifacts, as well as suggestions for future videos. I've linked the references used in the description below. Until next time, go forth and explore the lore.